This happened when I was 15, nearly a decade ago. I'm in my late 20s now, but that night still creeps into my thoughts sometimes. The night I got exactly what I wanted and regretted it. My parents rarely left me home alone. Being the youngest of three, they always made me tag along wherever they went, even if it was somewhere boring. But that winter evening, they were going to a family gathering I had zero interest in. I begged to stay home. I just want to chill and play some games, I told them. After a bit of hesitation, they agreed. It was only around 6 p.m., but winter made it feel like the middle of the night. The house was quiet, and I was loving it. I grabbed some snacks, settled on the couch with my console, and started gaming. Finally, some peace and freedom. About 30 minutes in, I heard a knock at the door. I paused my game, assuming my parents had forgotten something, but when I peeked through the peephole, my stomach sank. It wasn't them. A man was standing there. He was tall and broad, wearing a long coat that looked out of place for the weather too thin for the freezing cold. His face was partially shadowed, and he didn't say a word. He just stood there, motionless. I didn't open the door. I called out, asking who he was and what he wanted, but he didn't respond. Instead, he knocked again, slower this time, as if he knew it would freak me out. Then the doorknob started to jiggle. That's when the fear hit me. He wasn't here by mistake. He was trying to get in. I grabbed my phone and bolted to the kitchen, my heart racing. I called my mom first. She panicked when I told her what was happening and told me to call the police right away. They were on their way home, but I could tell it wouldn't be fast enough. I hung up and dialed 911, explaining everything to the operator. While I was still on the call, I heard a new sound, the faint rattle of a window. The man had moved. I crept into the living room to get a look. He was at one of the side windows now, holding a crowbar. He tapped it lightly against the glass, testing it. He hadn't seen me yet, but I was too scared to move. Then, out of nowhere, red and blue lights lit up the yard. The man froze, looking toward the driveway, and bolted into the woods as the police pulled in. The officers searched the area, but didn't find him. They did find the crowbar, lying in the snow near the window. When my parents got home, they were frantic. They hugged me, apologized for letting me stay behind, and promised never to leave me alone again. At the time, I wanted to act tough, but the truth is, I was terrified. I had begged for that alone time, desperate to play my games and enjoy the quiet. I got what I wanted, but it came with a price I wasn't ready for. Even now, all these years later, I still think about the man at the door, the crowbar tapping against the glass, and how close things came to going much worse. Okay, this happened a little while ago, and I still check my locks twice every night because of it. I live alone in a quiet neighborhood. Most of my neighbors are older folks who mostly keep to themselves. Across the street, there's Mrs. Adams. She's elderly and has dementia, or so I've heard from the other neighbors. She's not threatening or anything, just confused a lot of the time. I'd see her wandering outside occasionally, usually looking for her dog or calling out for someone who wasn't there. It was sad, but honestly, I didn't think much of it. That morning started like any other. I woke up groggy after a long day, still exhausted, and shuffled to the kitchen to make coffee. Except when I got there, I wasn't alone. Mrs. Adams was in my kitchen. She was going through my cabinets, pulling things out, knocking stuff onto the floor, and muttering to herself. At first, I thought I was still dreaming, but I wasn't. I stood there in the doorway, frozen. She didn't even notice me at first, and I had no idea how she'd gotten into my house. Then I realized the back door. I'd been so tired the night before that I must have forgotten to lock it. When she finally noticed me, everything shifted. She turned to face me, and her expression was a mix of anger and panic. She was clearly upset and started accusing me of something I didn't understand at first. It wasn't until she mentioned her dog that it clicked. She thought I had taken her dog, or worse, that I'd hurt it. I didn't even know she had a dog. She was frantic, and nothing I did seemed to calm her down. She kept moving around the kitchen, pulling open drawers and cabinets, knocking over whatever got in her way. At one point, she grabbed a knife from the counter, a big one, and started waving it around. My heart was pounding. I stayed as still as I could, trying not to panic, but the whole situation felt surreal. She was pacing, muttering about her dog, and accusing me of terrible things. It was clear she wasn't thinking straight, and I couldn't risk getting too close. I managed to back out of the kitchen and grab my phone. I called the police, keeping my voice as quiet as possible so I wouldn't startle her. They told me to stay calm and keep an eye on her until they arrived. Those few minutes felt like an eternity. She kept pacing, searching through drawers and making a mess. Every now and then, she'd pause and glare at me like she was waiting for me to admit something I hadn't done. I just stood there, my chest tight, hoping the police would show up before anything worse happened. When they finally arrived, they got her to drop the knife and led her outside. She was crying by then, still talking about her dog and how she couldn't find him. They called her son, who I'd heard about before, but had never actually seen. From what I'd been told, he didn't visit her often. That's the part that stuck with me. She'd mentioned before how her son rarely came to see her, how he'd moved far away and was too busy to care. I didn't understand how someone could leave their mother like that, especially when she clearly couldn't take care of herself. She didn't belong alone in that house. She needed help, real help. The kind you get in a facility with people trained to look after you. After that morning, I started locking every door and window religiously. It wasn't just about keeping her out. It was about avoiding the kind of chaos I'd woken up to that day. I still see her sometimes. She's usually wandering her yard or staring out the window. It's sad, really. She doesn't seem to recognize me anymore, which is probably for the best. I feel bad for her, but at the same time, it's not something I can fix. She's not my responsibility, and there's only so much I can do. So, I keep my distance, and I keep my doors locked. I'm 17, and I live alone with my mom. It's just the two of us in a quiet neighborhood, and I've always been fine being home alone. My mom works late shifts, and I'd get used to the quiet, lock the doors, watch some TV, or do whatever else needed doing. It was usually boring, but I never minded. Until that one afternoon. It was around 4 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I peeked through the peephole. There was a man standing on the porch, holding a clipboard, smiling like he was ready to do business. He said he was from some network company here to check our internet connection. He explained that our router needed a service check, and I thought it sounded legit. My mom had mentioned something about needing an upgrade, but she didn't go into specifics. I didn't think twice. I opened the door. The moment I let him in, everything felt wrong. At first, he was calm, walking around like he knew what he was doing. He went straight to the living room, asked about the router, and started talking about how outdated it was. I asked him a few questions, and his answers sounded fine, nothing too strange. Then he started asking me to sign some forms, which didn't look official at all. There was no logo, just some basic lines of text. He told me it was for authorization to begin the work, and I was already a little suspicious, but I wasn't sure what else to do. That's when he asked for my credit card information. He said there was a processing fee that needed to be paid up front. I froze. I knew something was off, but I didn't have time to think before I heard the front door creak open. My mom had come home early. The man looked startled, and I quickly explained what had been going on. My mom took one look at him and instantly knew something was wrong. She demanded that he leave, but before he could react, our neighbor came over. He'd been watching from his window and saw the man's suspicious behavior. He spoke with the guy for a moment, then told him to leave. The man's face shifted from calm to panicked. He suddenly became tense, his eyes darting between us as if calculating his next move. Without another word, he bolted toward the door, pushing past my mom and me, almost tripping over himself in his rush to get out. He didn't look back as he hurried down the porch steps and straight toward his car parked across the street. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. As he reached the car, I saw 2 other men sitting inside. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't see much, but I could tell they were watching us intently. The man at the door didn't even glance back at us as he jumped into the car, and it sped off down the street. Our neighbor, who had been standing in the doorway, looked just as freaked out as I felt. He muttered that he had a bad feeling about the whole situation, especially now that the man was in a hurry to leave. He told us the man was known in the neighborhood not as a technician, but as someone who had been running scams for a while. The police came shortly after, but there was no sign of the car or the men. We gave them the details, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was lurking behind the scenes. What if my mom hadn't come home? What if I had signed those forms or given him my credit card info? The whole thing felt off from the start, but it wasn't until I saw the other men in the car that it truly hit me. I had almost fallen for something much darker. I don't know what their real plan was. Maybe they wanted to rob us, or maybe they had something worse in mind. All I knew was that I was lucky, but the thought of those men watching us from the car still makes my stomach churn. The scariest part? I'll never know how long they'd been watching me, or how many other people they'd tricked before. What if they were doing this to other homes in the area? It's a thought that haunts me, and I'll never forget the feeling of realizing just how close I came to making a huge mistake. I've learned my lesson: never let a stranger into your house, no matter how convincing they seem. And I'll never stop thinking about those men in that car, waiting, watching. It's a reminder that not all strangers are just harmless salespeople. My girlfriend went out of town for a couple of days to handle some personal stuff, so I'm just kicking back, doing my thing, watching TV, drinking a beer, and just not giving a damn. It's quiet, nothing unusual. But man, that night, that shit was straight up freaky. So I'm watching some random Netflix show when I hear it. At first it's super soft, like barely even noticeable. A voice, it says my name, and it sounds just like my girlfriend. Babe. I was like, what the hell? But then I tell myself I'm just hearing shit. I mean, she's not supposed to be back until Sunday, so there's no way it's her. Probably just some sound from the TV or outside, so I ignore it. A few minutes later, I hear it again. This time, it's a little clearer. Babe. Now I'm like, okay, what the fuck is going on? I'm 100% sure I heard her voice, but I'm home alone. I can't even explain why it's freaking me out, but it is. I grab my phone and text her, "Yo, you good? Thought you were coming back tomorrow, but I'm tripping, right?" She replies quickly, "Yeah, I'm good. Just chilling here. Why, you okay?" I breathe a little easier after seeing her reply. She's not back yet, and it's just me being weird. Still, the feeling in the air isn't right. I get up and check the place: kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, nothing. Everything's locked, no windows open, no weird sounds. But the feeling's still there. I sit back down on the couch, trying to get back into my show, but then I hear it again. "Babe." This time, it's a little closer, like it's coming from the hallway. I'm starting to get freaked out. I check the hallway, go up to the door, look out into the apartment. Nothing. No one's there. Everything's locked and the lights are all on. I try to shake it off, but now it feels worse. I can't even explain it. I keep looking down the hallway like I'm waiting for something to show up, but nothing does. The apartment's quiet, dead quiet. I don't know what to do. It doesn't make sense. She's supposed to be in another city, not here. I check the peephole, the locks, everything, nothing. But that shadow I see in the hallway freaks me out. It looks like something's moving. I grab my keys, throw on my shoes, and just leave. I don't care if I'm overreacting. I need air. I need to be out of that apartment. So, I go for a drive to clear my head. I'm trying to tell myself I'm being crazy, but all I can think about is that voice. I drove around, aimlessly, for a couple of hours, trying to shake it off. Eventually, I come back to the apartment. I open the door and everything's quiet again. Normal. Everything's locked, nothing's out of place. I didn't tell her what happened. I don't even know how to explain it. She'd probably think I'm just being paranoid, but I know what I heard and it felt too real. I start Googling shit. Maybe I'm not the only one who's been through something like this. I come across some Reddit threads where people talk about hearing voices that sound like someone they know, and then it clicks for me. A couple of people mentioned something about mimics, creepy shit that can copy voices to mess with people. Could that be what I heard? I don't know. Maybe I'm losing it. Am I going crazy? I don't know if I should tell her what happened. Part of me feels like it's nothing, just me freaking out alone in the apartment. But another part of me can't ignore it. What do you think? Should I tell her or just leave it? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving a comment below. Your feedback helps me create more content you'll love. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more updates. See you in the next video.